I think there is a need for a czar. And the reason I'm saying this is that if you put yourself in the minister's shoes or the NSIA shoes, Madame Drouin, if there's a briefing to provide, there's so many government departments involved in the fight against fentanyl. How do you coordinate all that? So I see this person as a person building relationships with the United States, a person building relationships with Mexico, and I see this person as just a conduit where everything that's being done from a government, a federal government perspective, flows up to this person, who then is in a better position to brief the Prime Minister or Cabinet.
Part of my conversation there last hour with RCMP Commissioner Mike Duhem. As we mentioned, the federal government is now creating a fentanyl czar, part of a deal with the U.S. And officials there to avert a trade war. This morning I spoke with David Asher about Ottawa's response. He led an anti-fentanyl task force during the first Trump administration, and he's now a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. David Asher, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm sure you know Canada is responding to some of the concerns that President Trump has expressed around the border and fentanyl. Our public safety minister says that Canada will have a new fentanyl czar before this tariff deadline comes into place at the beginning of March. What do you make of the decision by the Canadian government to take this new position, and what would you hope the role would accomplish?
Well, I think it's quite constructive and proactive. Not just reactive. I think that, Canada has to focus on the fact that it's losing thousands of young people a year to illicit fentanyl poisoning. It's basically become a mass murder weapon for communist China and the Mexican cartels in partnership. As someone who's worked on counter-narcotics and law enforcement and counterterrorism, this is a type of narco-terrorism that's afflicting your country, and I think that you're doing the right things here. It's not just because of Trump. I think people are waking up inside your country.
One of the things that we have pointed to a lot over the past couple of weeks when responding to the president is the amount of fentanyl that crosses from Canada to the U.S., which is, as you know, very small. It was 43 pounds was seized at that border. But I understand you think that is not sort of something that we should be focusing on, the fact that it's a small amount, particularly compared to Mexico. Give me your thoughts.
Well, several months ago, you had the biggest lab in the history of the world, taken over by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Vancouver. We'd never even seen anything like this. It made Breaking Bad look like, minor league. So that, and definitely where there was Chinese organized crime, possibly Iran as well. The facts have not been released by your government. It's sort of astonishing that they haven't provided more information publicly, but I think they know they're sitting on a big scandal here. The fact that this thing emerged and it's tied into these biker gangs who've been hired to go down to the United States in some cases and assassinate people like, my former boss, Secretary Mike Pompeo, President Trump, and others. This is another whole level of scandal involving it. But the key thing to focus on is that someone was making over 100 million doses of deadly fentanyl in a lab that you didn't know about right under your nose. Now, how many other labs do you think you have going? And, let me focus on one last thing. There's very little border enforcement. So 42 kilograms, it's a nonsensical number. We don't have, most of the drugs are going from Mexico to Canada and then being brought south into the Northwest United States on ships. You have almost no port enforcement with police. So we have no idea, except from our sources, what's going on. And we hear some bad things.
I will say, they did find the super lab. I take your point, it was under their nose, but there was police work done in order to find it, uncover it, and charge the people responsible. So that is a positive piece. I take your point, though, that there could be more. And so tell me what more you think needs to be done to deal with some of the things you're talking about, as well as the czar. They've increased surveillance at the border. They are going to crack down on Mexican cartels. I talked to the RCMP commissioner about that, and there is more shared intelligence that's going to happen between Canada and the U.S. What else would be helpful in this instance, then?
Let me first stress the RCMP is an excellent organization. Okay, you've got very good police in your country. Yeah. Okay, you got great CSIS, your intelligence organization is first rate as well. Your problem is your laws. It's the Stinchcomb law, which I'm not, like the world's expert on, but basically every time we try to go up on a phone number in Canada, and almost all the money laundering networks tied to China, which is about 90% of all money laundering in the United States, is tied to Canada. Okay, so when we try to go up on those numbers with your police, they have to inform the person that we're targeting their number. That's crazy. How can we run an undercover police operation with your country? Which is why we don't run them, which is why the seizure statistics are so low, because we don't even try to work with Canada because your laws are abbreviated and distorted. And I think this is an issue that goes back in Canadian history a long time. You need to update your legal structures. And if you do, and create a Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, like we have in the United States, and designate them as terrorists, which you're going to do, I think we'll solve a lot of these problems. I think terrorists will come off, and we'll be in an excellent position to be partners to stop this stuff from terrorizing our country. I mean, our countries are getting killed by fentanyl. We got to protect ourselves.
So I just want to end on this. You just said if we do these things, the tariffs won't, well, they're not on, but they won't go on. I mean, do you believe that this is about fentanyl for the president, or that it's about other things? This is just one of the pieces that he is using as leverage here.
Well, I take him literally, and I think literally he says it's about fentanyl, and I think it is. I mean, we're losing, 80 to 100,000 people in North America between the U.S. and Canada. We got to stop this nonsense. We got to target these Mexican cartels. We need to focus on their money. So the key thing is to target the banks that are behind it. And of course, you've got a sort of tragic situation where TD Bank was laundering billions of dollars for Mexican cartels, and now it's being hit with one of the largest fines, literally, in the history of money laundering. So, it's not blame Canada for me. I love Canada. Canada's a great country. We need to work together. We've got our own problems with our banks laundering money too in the United States. So we gotta break the bank on fentanyl trafficking for these cartels and bring them down and take them out.
Okay, David Asher, thank you for your time this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, there's some of the changes that Ottawa is hoping to make to fentanyl trafficking across the border, but this crisis has affected tens of thousands of families right across Canada. Petra Schultz is one of them. She's an advocate of drug policy reform and co-founder of Moms Stop the Harm, and she joins me this morning. Nice to see you.
Thank you for inviting me, Rosemary.
I want to start just with your story. You lost your son to fentanyl. What can you tell us about him and how that happened?
Well, the fentanyl crisis really emerged after oxycodone was reformulated. So that was 2012 onward. Danny was in recovery in 2014 when he returned to use, bought one more pill, which he thought was then called a street oxy, but in fact contained fentanyl. And Danny was home alone like so many. And he died in April 30th, 2014 from accidental fentanyl poisoning, which made me an accidental advocate.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry for your loss, even all these years later. But I do want to ask you how you feel about this crisis sort of being put back in the spotlight right now because of some of the demands of the president. How do you feel about that?
Well, being back in the spotlight is a good thing because sometimes it feels ignored. Yeah. It feels somewhat politicized. And I'm concerned that the measures are being proposed, while maybe they're important in other aspects, like border security is important, especially when your best friend and neighbor suddenly is not your best friend anymore. But the measures that actually help our loved ones, the measures that help people use drugs, are not border security. It's demand side actions. Border security is focused on the supply, and that can have unintended side effects, as we saw during COVID-19 when the borders were really locked down. The drug supply increased in toxicity, and all kinds of things were mixed in, and we saw death rates go up a lot.
The things that you just heard there from the RCMP commissioner that they're going to be doing differently, the fentanyl czar who will coordinate, the sharing of intelligence with the U.S., the cracking down on super labs and precursors, the things used to make fentanyl. Do you think that those things are going to make a difference, that they will help with your concerns directly?
Sadly, I don't think so. I think the fentanyls are the best we can hope for, that the position doesn't do any harm. What we need to do, in conjunction with any kind of supply side action like reducing demand, we need to reduce demand. And that is done by helping people, by providing rapid access to treatment, which is really absent in most provinces. People should be able to get into treatment the day they want it. And that is not possible in most cases. We should also offer people regulated alternatives to toxic street drugs, those who are at greatest risk of dying. We need to deal with underlying conditions such as mental health, poverty, homelessness. There's a lot of work to be done, and I'm afraid if we invest a lot in border security, that might actually take away from the measures that save lives. We have a 4-pillar drug strategy: prevention, treatment, harm reduction, and enforcement. And already, without these new investments, enforcement alone gets more funding than the other 3 combined. And I just hope that money is not taken away, and that at the same time as we are reducing supply, we also take measures to reduce the demand, because that is what will save lives.
Yeah, I mean, it is such a multi-pronged issue and crisis that this is just part of it. You're quite right to make that point. Petra Schultz, thank you so much for making the time for us this morning. We appreciate your perspective very much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, have a good rest of your day.